Light as a feather, stiff as a board. Light as a feather, stiff as a board.
We are the weirdos, mister.
Black as night, erase death from our sight. White as light, mighty hectate make it right. I myself am strange and unusual.
Cast a circle, spark some incense, and grab a cup of tea, because it's time for the Cousins Coven podcast. I'm Sharon.
And this is Wendy. Welcome back to the Coven, you guys. We're happy as always to have you here.
Yes, we are officially in July by the time we're recording this. And happy July, happy Pride Month. Hope everyone's holding it together.
Yes.
So I think today we're going to be talking about Mount Shasta and all the legends and paranormal activity that are going on up there. But first, we're going to do some news and see if we have any updates between us. So, Wendy, what's new?
So nothing new per se, but I did find this really cool news article. There's this company called CFI. CFI stands for the Center for Inquiry Investigations Group. And they are currently doing this thing where if you think that you have a supernatural ability, they want you to contact them. And if you do have some sort of paranormal, they're calling it a paranormal challenge. So if you have a gift and you're able to test it and they're able to prove it, they're going to give you $250,000. And so I see that they've only done 2 tests so far. That means they've only had 2 people write in.
Yeah, what do they deem as powers?
So they want anything that you could possibly have. So like one of the ones that I read, they're calling it dead or alive. This person says that he can see someone's picture and determine if they're dead or alive. And so he writes in, you have to write, they have an application. You fill out the application, write an essay, tell them your abilities, and then they test you. So this guy, they were able to Skype or Zoom with him or something. And they hold up pictures, the guy looks, and they found out that what he was really doing was using a pendulum to answer his questions. So he doesn't have the ability, but he does have the ability to use a pendulum.
That doesn't count for them?
Nope. They said that didn't count. They wanted to know if he personally could do it, not use a pendulum.
Not using any device. Okay.
Yep, not using any device.
There's so much going on in my mind, flipping back and forth, like as you're describing them, because my scared skeptic brain is saying, it's a trap, get out, it's a trap, Admiral Akbar style. They're rounding you up like mutants and they're going to kill you. Then my other brain is saying, this is really cool, this is really fun. Maybe they just really, really want to test or prove that this stuff does or does not exist. So I'm wondering where they're coming from.
Right.
I wouldn't have anything that I could go to with, like getting feelings and intuitions is not a power.
No.
So I'm busted. I couldn't go. That's really fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they had another test that they did. This guy claimed that he could listen to music, and while he was listening to the music, he could cause thunder and lightning to happen. And then he also said that he could teleport himself. Well, really what he was doing was walking from point A to point B, and he said that was teleportation.
Oh my God. What about the thunder?
And that was all in his head. They found out he was coming down off of a cocaine trip.
Dude, seriously, when you have an open call like this for powers, you're probably going to see a lot of it.
Right. Right. They claim really that they are just trying to keep a skeptic mind. So they are complete skeptics and don't believe in anything.
I had a feeling, because why else would they be so open-minded to anything? They're just basically saying none of it's real.
Right.
And prove to me I'm wrong.
Right. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I honestly don't know if I expect anybody to be able to go in there and prove them anything, to be honest. I just don't know if that's the way things work.
I know. I'm like, if you want to know about synchronicities, I get those up that, like every 5 minutes, I feel like I get a synchronicity. That's not a superpower. That's not for anybody else. It's just for me.
Yep. Yeah, the magic is always much more subtle and it's not some flashy power like in Harry Potter. So
Right. Right.
but that's interesting. I kind of want to keep tabs on that and see what other fun things come into their door.
Yeah, I saved them to my my favorites bar.
Good.
It's funny because they also have done tests like on the curvature of the Earth because they wanted to debunk flat earthers.
Ah, okay. I can't blame them for wanting to do that. Do something
Right.
good.
Yeah. So that was kind of all my news for today, and I feel bad I don't have any updates on anything.
I know, me either. We just survived a night of fireworks and it was loud and people were putting them off
Yes.
like right above our houses. And I was,
Right.
speaking of loud thunder, I was playing loud thunder music just to try to calm my pets down and be like, it's just the
Oh,
thunder music. We're fine.
I had to give my dog CBD dog treats.
Nice.
Yeah. That helped. She just was in a daze then. I felt kind of bad. I was like, oh man, did I just drug my dog?
The answer was yes. Yes,
Yeah.
you did. I was going to say, what a good mom. You drugged your dog.
Yeah. But before that, she was just acting really crazy and she couldn't handle it. And I was like, oh, poor baby girl.
Yeah, I don't know. It's sad, like all the pollution we cause on the 4th, and then all the poor animals we're scaring. That being said, fireworks are pretty, but
They are. I have my own. I used to love the 4th of July. Like I loved it absolutely, but I never really understood the premise behind it. And now that I'm an adult, like I just don't enjoy celebrating it anymore.
Right, it's another one of those holidays where you peel back the details to find some sort of oppression of someone.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
like,
We're still celebrating this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But barbecue, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I made homemade Chinese food, so that was great.
Oh, delicious.
Yeah.
Well, before you make me hungry, I say we move on to Legends of Mount Shasta.
Yes, I'm really excited to talk about this. I know it's something we've wanted to tackle for a while, and now here we are.
Yeah. I was a little overwhelmed. There's a lot of claims and a lot of activity, and it almost overwhelmed me to where I was like, it's too much. It has to all be fake.
Right. But I don't think it is.
Right.
I think there's a lot of validity to it. So I kind of want to start with the basics. Let's talk about what Mount Shasta is. So Mount Shasta is in Northern California in the Cascade Mountain Range, for those who don't know. And the Cascade Mountain Range kind of goes from California to British Columbia. Shasta Trinity National Forest kind of surrounds Mount Shasta. And to kind of put it in perspective, that is 2.2 million acres of forest.
Lovely, I'm sure.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm getting a loud ringing in my ears. Do you hear anything by chance?
No, just some ghost trying to contact you.
Probably. So, I guess that Mount Shasta also sits in the Cascade Volcanic Arc, which is an arc of 19 volcanoes that go from California up to British Columbia on that chain of the Cascade Mountain Range, which is also linked into the Pacific Ring of Fire. And I thought it was kind of, yes, I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but that Pacific Ring of Fire is just kind of on the Northwest coast and flips over around into where Hawaii is and that kind of thing. And so I remember as a child hearing that if one volcano went off, that it would activate another volcano. If an earthquake was big enough, that it would activate these volcanoes. And the theory scientifically is that if the earthquake was large enough, it would activate them all at once and become a giant ring of fire.
That must have been really terrifying as a kid to get that information.
Yes. So I just always had that fear.
That was in the back of your mind as like, any day now, guys, that Pacific Fire.
Right.
Ring of Fire.
But Mount Shasta, it was created about 593,000 years ago, but the last time that it erupted was in 1786. It erupts every 600 to 800 years, so we're not due to have one for a while. But the geologists in the area believe that it, if there was a large enough eruption out of it, it would go into a caldera, kind of like Crater Lake did here in Oregon.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
Someday that probably will happen then.
Right, right. And outside of all of the popular all of the paranormal things that go on there, all the metaphysical things that go on there, it's a very famous place to go for hiking, boating, skiing, horseback riding, camping. I was able to find out that there are 10 different tribes of native people who lived at the base of the mountain, or kind of on the mountain, or around the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And the oldest settlement dates back to around 5,000 BC.
Oh my gosh.
And that really put things into perspective for me, because I never knew that. I thought that maybe Native Americans had, or Native people had been in that area since maybe the 1500s, but 5,000 BC, that's a
Wow.
big deal.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of history.
Yeah, a lot of history that is not talked about.
Right.
And a lot of these native people have been kind of pushed out of their land, and they're not even recognized as having their own tribe, at least by standards of getting health care and other things like that. It's really sad. I was watching a bunch of different videos about how there's this tribe called the Winnemen, and they used Shasta Lake area, because Shasta Lake is man-made, and so they used to use that area thousands and thousands of years ago to do rituals for women who were coming of age. And they had these beautiful dances and full garb, and now the lake is there, and the government refuses to stop people from coming in and out of the lake during times when they want to do the ritual. And so a lot of times they'll be doing their ritual, and people are going by in boats in the background, flashing their boobs at them and yelling obscenities at them, and not even, I know, it's really violent, the videos that I was watching. And
oh my gosh,
like,
they had it on video?
Yeah.
That's just disgusting and disturbing. I mean, it has to be really hard to get any respect as someone who has rituals and try to fight people for land and things like that. I think when I think about that in America, I see the tourist aspect of it, like in some places where they do it as something for the white people to come look at the dance. You know what I mean? And it's like, no, this shit is sacred. We do it on our time, on our schedule, and with purpose and for reasons. It's not just for your entertainment. And, you know, I can't really speak to that, but I can only emphasize with the tragedies that we're learning about.
Yeah. It was interesting too. They said that, you know, when the ritual is started, and if somebody interrupts them, they have to start all over again. I mean, we can empathize with that as well, because if I'm doing a spell and somebody interrupts me, I have to start all over again too, because it's like the magic didn't even happen.
Oh yeah, it's always hard when you're trying to do magic, and let's say you have roommates. Like I've had that before, where I didn't warn people I was burning a candle, and they're like, hey, knocking on my door, someone burning, and I'm just like, leave me alone, bye.
Yeah.
Or like if you're trying to do it outside, I've gone camping and tried to do it outside, and just know you're being watched. Like, finding sacred space and alone time might be a struggle for most people.
Yeah, for sure.
We digress.
I know we digress. So I also found out that Mount Shasta is not just a mountain. There's also a town called Mount Shasta, and this was one of the most prominent places to stop during the gold rush. So as people were coming from the east or the south, they would stop here on their way to Eureka, which is a big gold mining town in Northern California. And so a lot of people would stop there, and during the gold rush, there were a lot of stories of people finding paranormal or seeing paranormal things there.
Yes. So let's get into that paranormal as far as like, what are the claims and what is the phenomena being witnessed? So there's a lot. People have witnessed UFOs. orbs. They've seen Yeti and Sasquatch. There's legends of fairies. There's like this mystical cave named Pluto's Cave. And on top of that, there's claims of alien, Lumerians, and actual almost like cults and groups and organizations. So we're going to try to look at this one by one and look at what people have been saying. What are the common strings here? So let's just start with the UFOs.
Yes.
I have taken some notes, and it seems like a lot of it is kind of similar. So a lot of people driving by have seen UFOs, and this claim that the UFO comes out of the peak of the mountain and just zips up into the sky is one I've seen, and that just sparks my child brain like, wait, what? And it's considered to actually be one of North America's UFO hotspots, and to many ET experiencers, Shasta has been a major beacon for aliens, and there's been a lot of just UFOs hovering around the area at night and then zipping around inside and just coming to and from, it seems like, the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
People who are driving do see the silent saucers zooming around, changing directions. There was one instance where just multiple cars ended up stopping, and then one person would drive up and see people pointing up at the sky, so they join. And just like all these witnesses have seen something as they pull over and they look up. And this was kind of in the 60s and the 70s that I was seeing a lot of witnesses come forth and finally like tell their tales now.
Mm-hmm.
There's an author of a book that I had was reading back in the 80s. He was driving a truck. I guess he was duck hunting, and it was over in the sewer ponds by the Shasta Resort. And I guess he was just driving kind of slow, smoking a cigarette, and then he sees a silver disc saucer with no windows or entrance ports to be seen, and it was just cruising silently. And then it shot off back towards this one area. And then it was just extreme high speed and vanished out of thin air. And then he was in this dazed state seeing the whole thing. You know, he just stopped driving and looked up at it. And then when he looked over, he comes into focus on this coyote that's just stopped staring at it too. And it's kind of funny because they just have this moment of like staring at the sky in disbelief. Just kind of like they both were in shock. And he said it affected his psyche. And then he ended up trying to shoot the coyote. So I was like, Dick, why'd you do that?
Oh my gosh. I was thinking that him and the coyote would meet eyes. Like they'd be looking at each other and be like, whoa, did you see that?
Yeah, like the coyote just points up like, whoa, bro. Yeah. Did I just see that? Yeah, no. His hunter instincts kicked in, and he decided to try to get that coyote. But yeah, there's another sighting. I'm going to just try to read this excerpt from a book. Okay, this one is written from someone who was older, but their memory is when they're like 15 years old. They said that they saw a lot of UFOs, that they lived in the area. Their dad saw UFOs. Their best friend saw UFOs. And one day when they were 15, they were on their way to a Mormon church seminar. And it was really early, like 5:30 a.m., fall of 1980. And they say that when they turned onto Adams Drive from Rockfellow Drive, they were sitting in the middle of the truck next to the dad who was driving, and they saw 3 circular dish-shaped UFOs. And they pulled over and they just watched. And this lasted from anywhere from 12 to 20 minutes. And again, they just had this feeling of shock and amazement and super weird all at the same time. They said they were scared for a little bit because they just kind of thought maybe they could do whatever they wanted. They were powerless in the situation and maybe they were going to be invaded. But again, they were young, so they didn't really understand it all. And what they just remember is just how that craft didn't move like any other flying craft they'd ever seen. They were super fast. They'd hover in air, but it was different than a helicopter. The airships were really steady and just fluid movements the way they flew about. They also had brilliant lights that were completely around the aircraft, and the lights moved around. And it was nothing like they'd ever seen. So I thought that was a pretty good experience to see not 1, but 3, and to see them for a long period of time.
Right. And you said, what year was that, did you say?
This was in 1980.
Okay. Did they say how big they were?
No, they do not.
Okay. I was just curious.
Yeah, that would have been interesting to see if they
Mhm.
had a size, but no, they don't. And when I was going through this book is just a bunch of testimonies of locals from the area that were brave enough to come
Nice.
forward. And it was the same kind of thing. It would be circular, the silver disc shaped classic UFO that we've come to know, and silent, zooming around, always seen from the road. And it also has, they're seeing like the orbs and the lights. So it makes me wonder if the orbs are connected to the UFOs. But other people have seen just orbs or like large bright lights. Some people were saying they saw these crossed shaped lights zooming around in the skies. Others said triangle shaped lights. And one witness even came forward in this book having witnessed a duration of like one fireball in the sky, like a really quick thing.
Yeah.
And then this stuff hasn't been new. If you go back to older news reports of the early 20th century, passengers on trains that would go by the mountains would crowd the windows on one side, trying to get a glimpse of those lights. So this has been going back for a very, very long time.
Right. Yeah. I read reports of like the mid to late 1800s saying that people would see like a beam of light coming from the mountain and up into the sky, just a beam of light. And I was like, well, what would cause that?
Yeah, that is a little intense. I have seen how Mount Shasta is considered like one of the 7 holy mountains in the world. And some people say that Mount Shasta is a catalyst for drawing things there, like drawing psychics and telepaths and aliens.
Right.
And I wonder if it's true. Like we've talked about how mountains can have like kame, or mountains can have spirits and energy. And why not? Why wouldn't this powerful mountain have a ton of earth energy at the very least? So is that connecting to some sort of outer space energy,
I think it could be. I was reading reports that it lets off its own or emits its own kind of vibration. Everything has a vibration, but this one is specific. And I couldn't really narrow down, any actual reports of what, gigahertz or whatever vibration it is. But what if it falls into that category and does it draws people there. It draws not just us, but entities there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot going on here. So I feel like that is part of the phenomenon. I would totally believe that it's a catalyst.
Right.
So of course I want to talk about Bigfoot. My boy Bigfoot has been seen here. And even the town itself, like in the area, they celebrate Bigfoot as the town mascot. So if you go through town, you'll see like carved wood cutouts of Bigfoot and like t-shirts of Bigfoot. So I love that about the Pacific Northwest. But the sightings here aren't what you would think of like your Harry and the Hendersons Bigfoot, brown ape. It's typically a white ape, light tan, or just like a dirty white fur. And so it's more comparison, I would say, to Yeti.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's tons of like small blips that I'm able to find. Some of this I think comes from the Hopi Project, where they were getting a bunch of stories from the Native Americans. And it's just like the tiniest blips. And I'm like, you cannot do this to me. I need to know details. It's like when I have to stop you and you say something really fast and I'm like, wait, what? So here's a couple that did that to me. In 1947, 2 people see Bigfoot cross Highway 89 south of Mount Shasta. That's it. 1962, a woman reports camping in her trailer on the eastern slopes of Mount Shasta and observes a Bigfoot woman giving birth to a baby while under a pine tree.
What the heck?
And that's all I could find. I searched Google. That is all I could find. And I was that sounds like that would be an experience. Like, does the Bigfoot give birth standing up, like some woman working in the fields and then just like cradle him up and keep going? Or was it like a long birth? Like she sat there for hours,
Right.
So that one has been messing with my mind, I'll tell you. I have a lot of questions. Who cut the umbilical cord?
Was there even an umbilical cord?
Yeah, was there an umbilical cord? Where was Dad? Did he miss the birth?
He was smoking cigars in the back.
Yeah, yeah, and there was just, natural birth. And then in 1992, here's a blip of a campers who saw Bigfoot while camping in a meadow at Mount Shasta, and they were at 10,000 feet elevated under a full moon. So Bigfoot's out and about in the full moon. And I just was finding dozens and dozens and dozens of little short blips. But I came across one larger story that I just saved for podcasts because it includes 3 Yetis and 5 witnesses.
Whoa, okay. Now we're talking.
Yeah, here we go. So I got all the details. Forgive me if this is long. I'm just going to pull from the book. And I'll link the book down below. So there were 5 men. They were arriving up the Everett Memorial Highway, and they had parked just below the old ski lodge and walked up the spiral, narrow road to where the old ski lodge resided. The outer shell of the ski lodge was still left, although the inside was charred from a fire a few years back. It was a partly cloudy night and cold, lots of snow on the ground. Some satellites were visible, but not the greatest night for stargazing, as it turned out. We had another surprise awaiting us. Upon approaching the lodge from the south side, all 5 of us were in a loose line, and I, on the far left end, could see the west side of the building 50 feet away. The solid metal door, which was 7 feet tall, swung open, and the strongest, odoriferous, pungent, and musky smell blew up our noses, being downwind. A dirty, white-haired male Yeti appeared next to the edge of the door, his head as tall as the height of the door, and stared at us, as a female came next to him, then followed by a juvenile about 4 feet tall, who held onto its mother's leg in apparent fear. The female was little over 6 feet, 6 inches tall. They all stared at us. We stared back at their glowing amber eyes. The smell was bad, and they looked alarmed as we were, all of us. And then one of my friends just said, "Hey, let's rush them, like in football." Which I retorted, "Are you nuts? Let's not. Let's just leave them alone." And we all began to walk backwards as he motioned to the Yeti, saying, "We don't mean you any harm. We're going to leave." And they looked as if they understood us. And they had a human expression on their faces. So the guys just all start backing down the hillside. And the Bigfoot were following them, but they were keeping like a 50-foot distance between them. Let's see here. It took about 5 minutes for them to go backwards down this descent. And when they made it back, they got into the car. And then they all just were like, "Oh, we made it." So that was their experience of encountering the family. I'm wondering, was that the mom who gave birth under the tree?
Right.
I don't think it matches with the timeline.
I love how Bigfoot always smells like really bad. And I wonder if that's because they don't have soap.
Yeah, that's a common thing, that he smells horrible.
Yeah. And
horrible.
I'm not surprised that it could be a Yeti because there is snow year round on Mount Shasta.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean,
yeah. Why not a Yeti?
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
the terrain,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that happened in 1987. I forgot to mention.
Oh, okay.
So you can imagine them in 80s ski gear backing away from 3 Yeti.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the first time that I have come across stories of this like nuclear family of Bigfoots just all together. So I love that. And I love when people will say it's a female and not just the male. Like I think it changes it up and almost adds to the validity to get these details.
I love that she's like the same height as my husband too. It's like 6'5", 6'6". That's how tall my husband is. I'm like, I knew he was a Bigfoot. I just knew it.
Yeah, so he's about the size of a female Bigfoot. Yeah, but I also was able to see in that book that the other guys kind of told their version, but this guy told it like the most colorfully and added the most details. So
love it.
There are other people who are saying that did happen, and it's just like so, I don't know, I go back and forth with Bigfoot. Like sometimes I'm always 100% believing, and then I still wonder like, well, if it's just that common knowledge that he's there, all these people know he's there, what's the deal? Like I did see that some people liked to keep it on the down low because they would lie and they would say like, oh no, there's no Bigfoot here, because they want to protect them. So I guess I'm answering my own question.
Yeah, we have to protect them in a way. I mean, as much as I want to find them, if we found them, would we then do experiments on them and cause them to become extinct completely? And so I get that.
Right. So maybe the people of Shasta don't want to come across as crazy, so they keep this stuff to themselves. Maybe it's just like one of those local known things that you don't want to talk about, kind of like knock on wood, where if you bring it up, you'll see it.
Right.
There could be a lot of stigmas with the people who are witnessing this phenomenon that I am not aware of. But I'm excited about the prospect of Yetis.
Absolutely. And I've heard of Bigfoot stories throughout the whole Cascade Mountain Range. So,
of course.
Yeah, for this to be just another blip. Yeah. Awesome.
Right. Because this is the area that's like close to Willow Creek. This is where the footage of the Patterson Gimlin footage was shot of like the Bigfoot female walking across camera. And this is a big place for not only UFO but Bigfoot.
Right. And not that far from the Redwood Forest. So I could totally see Bigfoot being here, or a form of Yeti.
There's some theories onto maybe why there's Bigfoots in the area. And these were some theories that at least one or two of them I don't think we've talked about before, but one was that the Yetis are leftover genetic experimentations conducted by early off-worlders. So like remnants of UFO and alien fuckery, essentially. They just like left their pets behind. I don't know.
Jeez.
Or maybe that they were kind of left by the aliens to protect the base camp in Shasta itself, is another kind of hybrid of that theory. Another one is that, Yeti are just the Crow, Magnos, and Homo sapien hybrids that are left over, basically.
That I can get behind. I mean, that's what I think Bigfoot is. I'm starting to lean towards the scientific mind of it, but I go back and forth, so we'll see.
Yeah, where will you be next week? We don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's move on to the claims of fairies.
Yes, fairies.
So there's this place that's called like Fairy Falls. It's near Mount Shasta. It's a 20-foot wide waterfall, and it's technically called Bernie Falls, but it has like fairy lore. And there's a claim that fairies there will actually show themselves in the mist of the waterfalls, but like only in your peripheral vision of visitors who just sit looking over the falls. So to me, it almost sounds like when you're scrying or divining as a witch and you kind of zone out at the fire, or you zone out looking at the black pool of water or the mirror, and you just go into that place where maybe you see things in your peripheral. So I like that it is very, I don't know, it's like that magical between the worlds thing. You can't see a fairy straight on. It has to be in the peripheral.
Right.
Oh yeah, that's it. That's just it on fairies. I mean, that's it. Yeah. They might reveal themselves to you. They might not. That's all I could really find. So I don't have any locals who said they have seen fairies. But that might exist.
I did watch a couple of videos that people had done of the falls. I don't know if you did as well. I love waterfalls, and these ones are like the Bernie Falls one.
Yeah.
The video that I watched was a lot like falls that I've seen up at Silver Creek Falls, which is not that far from where we live. And the way that the video was shot made it look like the water was glowing. And I've seen waterfalls do that. And so I'm just like, gosh, it's so mystical and so beautiful. Of course we would think there were fairies there, or maybe that's a way to go through to the fairy world.
Right. Waterfall. Yeah, that mystical water is the portal to the other dimension, and they're like blipping through the mist, and that's so cute.
Yeah, I just love it.
Yeah, very Legend of Zelda, where you just have like a fairy falls and you get transported into their little place. So cool. That brings me to Pluto's Cave. That's kind of next on the agenda as maybe one of these cool places and these weird places going on in Shasta. So there's these little caves. They were formed from lava flow 190,000 years ago. And the caves were considered sacred to the Native Americans who were living there. And apparently, when the whites rolled on up in the 1863, they named it after the Roman god of the underworld and called it Pluto Cave. It's known as Pluto Cave, Pluto's Cave, or Pluto Caves. That all sounds the same.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically some version of Pluto's Caves. Because it has this like underworld and dark mystery to it. So I think that's why they decided to give it the name of the god of the underworld. And it seems like in some circles, it's acquired this reputation of being a place to meet aliens or a place to conjure spirits, and the spirits, that reside there. So there's been archaeological evidence of like just different ritual objects that have been discovered, or just areas that we could tell there was a fire pit and like sacred sites. So Pluto Cave sounds like it has history with maybe being a ritual sacred spot, but I'm not too sure the validity of that.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't doubt that
cool.
we talked about like how caves are great places for magic and conjuring gods. So it just makes sense that they would take advantage of a cave. And also who wouldn't live in a cave back in the day? I mean, that's like a shelter right then and there. So
right. And the fact that people have been living in that area since 5000 BC, of course they would start using caves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It just makes sense.
If walls could talk, what would Pluto's Cave say?
Right. So I have quite a few things to talk about too. I came across just a little bit of the native lore. A lot of the stories that I found were based on kind of the creator god and how it was created, and that there was some sort of fight between the god who lived on Mount Shasta and the god who lived over on Montezuma, which is where Crater Lake sits now.
Awesome.
And so there was this fight between the two. The creator god on Mount Shasta killed the god of Montezuma, which caused the destruction of Montezuma and turning it into Crater Lake.
Wow, that's some crazy cool legend.
Right. But most of the stories I found kind of were handed down from generation to generation. Other than that specific story is written out like over and over again. I found a lot of elaborate stories regarding it, but basically that's the gist of that cool story. But the natives in the area, they think that Mount Shasta is a sacred center of the universe. And they believe that a lot of paranormal activity does flock to the area, like we were talking about. There is a place, or this place, they actually nicknamed it Medicine Rock because they believe that there's a lot of healing energies on the mountain.
That's awesome.
And a lot of and that the waters on the mountain are also considered to be medicine worthy. So people would go there to have kind of these shamanic experiences, as well as a shaman would lead you up there to heal you.
That is way cooler than all of this other stuff.
Right. They also say that the mountain is an amplifier because it is a sacred center. And this means that if you have stuff to work on as far as shadow work goes, all of that is going to be amplified so that you can face it head on. And if you have abilities, those were going to be amplified if you go to the mountain. So people who go camping there will claim that all of these things that are weighing heavy on their mind that they're trying to let go of, they can actually let go of them on the mountain because the mountain gives them the power to do so.
This is so cool. Like doing sacred rituals there makes sense. And if it's amplifying healing and the releasing of like any like past trauma or pain, that is really dope.
Right.
Do they still do any kind of rituals there, I wonder? Or do they have any like retreats?
There are tons of retreats that I read about. I if you were an avid camper, I would suggest you do it on your own, though. A lot of the retreat centers that I found were run by people who were charging upwards of $1,000 an hour.
Okay. Not my
Yeah,
kind of
so
money.
right, exactly. So I was like, okay, but there were others that were not charging at all, and I think that the terrain in Mount Shasta can be difficult, and there are a lot of like I said, there's snow year round pretty much. So even in the middle of the summertime, you can hit snow. So you'd want to be careful if you go up there. But even going around the area is still good enough. So there are campgrounds, and you can go on small little hikes that are unguided and still be able to get the gist of it.
Okay, so that'll go in the bucket list of our future trips.
Exactly.
Because we could look for orbs, UFOs, Yetis, fairies.
Exactly. I read a lot of accounts of people who lived in different countries, or maybe even on the East Coast, who woke up one morning and just felt this vibration and this pull to go to Mount Shasta. Story after story of them just being pulled to go there, and it had to do with them working on past stuff. I found that to be very interesting, that the mountain just kind of calls you.
Yeah.
I also found a small ghost story legend from the native people. There's a lot of graveyards in the area, some of which are extremely old. But according to the Shasta Indians themselves, the area is haunted by what's called Exki. These are spiritual beings that can take on the form of lights, humans, animals, and all sorts of other things, kind of like shapeshifters.
Does this explain the orbs?
It could potentially. They say they're ghosts, like people who've passed on. But they're also said to bring with them this kind of trickster activity. So that's what makes them shapeshift into these different things. There were some native stories of them possessing people. They could also cause death and disease and other strange things to happen. That's kind of the lore around the Exki. I don't even know if I'm saying it right, and I feel bad, but it's spelled AXE, not comma, apostrophe KI.
Yeah, that's a good guess, because I honestly couldn't even attempt it.
Right.
But that kind of ties into the other phenomenon. If there is some sort of shapeshifter, what if that explains the lights, the fairies, the Bigfoots? Mm-hmm. That would be insane.
Right. And some of it was positive and some of it was negative. So, the stories of the Exki are kind of vast. So could be anything. That's kind of all I had about that. I wanted to talk about Count Saint Germain.
Yes, please break this down, because this I couldn't even wrap my head around. There's a lot going on. So just teach me, what the hell was going on in the 30s?
Right. So let's talk about who Count Saint Germain is first. I'm not going to go in complete detail, but I will say that he is considered to be an ascended master. He's said to have lived for 1,000 years or so. However, records kind of indicate that he lived between 1691 and 1784. He's listed as an adventurer, a scientist. He practiced magic and alchemy. He wrote poems, created music. He was a part of the Rosicrucians. He was this huge philosopher. And people just really had claimed to meet him throughout the years. And I think like the first time that someone met him was like in the year 500.
Oh,
and then, right. And then, some people believe that he was a vampire, that he...
What?
Yeah, that he sucked blood in order to stay alive.
Okay, is he hot or is he an old man?
He's an oldish man.
That's what I thought.
I think that...
I'm sorry to sexualize every vampire. I've been trained as a child.
Right.
All vampires are hot, including Nosferatu.
Right. Some of the people believed that he created with his alchemy an elixir of life, which actually made him immortal to become an ascended master. But an ascended master really is somebody who's passed on. So it's hard to say whether he is alive or dead, or whether he's just reincarnated and he looks the same over and over again. I don't know.
So
at any rate,
he just is teaching people about enlightenment and the occult, essentially?
Yes, and kind of what life is all about on Earth. So in the 1930s, this guy named Guy Ballard was hiking with his wife on Mount Shasta, and what he was searching for was the Shasta Brotherhood, also known as the Great White Brotherhood. And I hate that name so much, the Great White Brotherhood. My mind immediately went to arrogant white pricks, right?
And it has this tone of racism, like
right, exactly. But actually, it wasn't racist at all. When I did research into it, it was an occult circle with a cosmic destiny through spiritual hierarchy. So it's more of that spiritual hierarchy bullshit, but with some sort of cosmic destiny. But you did have to go up the ladder. It didn't matter what your color was. The race had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, the ladder system is where I think that leads to corruption and leads to people who claim to know the answers, or they'll take advantage of people, and it's always a little bit sketchy. So anyway, what ended up happening?
So while Guy and his wife were walking, they got kind of tired, so they decided to stop for lunch in this place called Panther Meadow, where there's a spring. And a young man came up to him and was like, just kind of had this appearance of being otherworldly almost. He was fair-skinned, light hair. At this point, he wasn't Saint Germain or anything like that, but he seemed like somebody that the Ballards could trust. And the kid or a young man or whoever, he said, "Hey, I have this drink. Would you like to take it?" And Guy said, "Sure." And it was this kind of creamy liquid, and he took it. And after a little bit of time that they were sitting there and they were talking, the man that he was talking to turned into Count Saint Germain.
Like morphed in front of him?
Yes, morphed in front of him. And so I believe that my personal opinion is the creamy liquid that he drank was a hallucinogenic.
Okay.
But the kid who gave it to him could have possibly been someone like a shaman almost, someone to give him an enlightened experience. Because what happened next was Saint Germain, he appeared to him in his robes, and he started testing Guy Ballard with different kind of riddles almost. And then once he passed the riddled tests, he took Mr. Ballard on a spiritual journey through space and time.
Okay.
Which can happen during a shamanic experience.
I know, like that's just very grandiose the way it's worded. This sounds like good literature, or like a really good, like you're saying, shamanic experience. So I love that you're putting that together.
Yeah. So Mr. Ballard said that he got the information from Saint Germain to create what he called later on the I Am activity movement, which became this great big cult and a way for them to steal money. I don't know if you've ever looked into the I Am activity, but basically it too became this kind of hierarchical thing. But they were basically like, oh, if you pay this, you can get to this ladder. And if you pay this, you can get to this ladder, kind of like a pyramid scheme.
Right.
But the message that was behind the movement was supposed to be one of positivity and enlightenment and teach you how to get to the enlightenment. But Mr. Ballard took it into this kind of negative. He took the message from Saint Germain and turned it into a money-making scheme, basically.
Tale as old as time.
Right?
Like how often is this happening to groups and organizations where they all sound good, they all sound really practical, but then once you get in there, there's all these details and, like you said, hierarchy and ladders. So
I'm like, I hope the ascended masters don't give up. Like, they're just like, we just give up on humanity now because all they want to do is take this great information of enlightenment and turn it into a money-making scheme for a cult.
right. That's why solitary practitioners are where it's at, y'all. You can do it on
Right.
your own.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I started thinking that what if the kid who gave him the stuff was a Lumerian?
Right.
And so
Why
that
not?
kind of
Let's
took
say he's a
me,
Lumerian. Why
yeah.
not?
So that kind of took me into the Lumerians.
Yeah, can
So
you break that down for me? Oh, I have a little bit of backstory on them too,
good.
actually.
Go for it. Do it.
I
Do it
forgot
for
I
me.
even looked into it because this, again, it just is too much for my brain to just shove in there. I'm like, what? No. Okay, so basically there's legends that say Mount Shasta was this last refugee for the survivors of the lost continent of Lumeria. Someday we'll probably go into the lore of Lumeria and how it got lost. But that's the footnote. So they established the secret colony in Mount Shasta to preserve their ancient customs. And basically, there's this underground cave system that is believed to exist between California, Nevada, and Utah, and it's containing all this Lumerian treasure. So basically, yeah, all that stuff. When Lumeria was submerged, the survivors fled to Shasta. That is like all I really know. And then that people during some time frame would say, I saw some beautiful person wearing robes walking around. Were they
Right.
Lumerians?
Right. Yeah. Anytime somebody witnesses a Lumerian, they're usually around 7 feet tall with white robes. They wear sandals. They pay for things with chunks of gold.
Yeah. Which I guess was happening around the town, like for real.
Right. People did that for real anyways.
What if they were just gold miners wearing part of the cult? Do you think they were part of the IM movement?
Well, they came up, I think the first sightings of the Lumerians were in the 1800s. So the IM movement didn't come until after the 1930s.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, they could be part of the IM movement, but I doubt it based on the fact that they were seen prior to that.
Okay, because in my mind, I thought maybe there's a connection here because if they're pretty weirdos wearing robes, are those pretty weirdos like part of the cult?
Right.
Like wearing some sort of cult uniform, but it's just its own separate layer.
Right.
What are your thoughts on this Lumerian stuff?
So here's some things that I found.
Okay.
So basically what, let's kind of go back and talk about Lumeria for a second before I kind of go into what I found.
Oh, good. Please.
About. So apparently Lumeria, from what I learned, was supposedly a continent that came about before even Atlantis existed. So it was Lumeria, then came Atlantis, and then they fought between each other and sank each other in this kind of thermonuclear war, kind of supposedly 12,000 years ago. And at that time, the Lumerians fled to Shasta, where they went into the cave, created this kind of crystal city, which they also called Talos at that point. Now, they called you know how you were talking about that the underground city was like Nevada,
Utah,
Shasta, Utah, all of that. So that is called the Agarthan network. And apparently each little town, or not town, but each crystal city would have an ascended master ruling that place.
Crystal City.
Right? And that there are over 100 cities in the earth as part of this network, which goes into the hollow earth theory.
Right. So there's some sort of Fraggle Rock just going on.
Right. So just bear with me during this because it's a lot. It's like a lot of out there information.
You're actually explaining it in ways that I can understand, though, so I appreciate that.
Oh, good. So it's said that Mount Shasta is actually run by two ascended masters, Saint Germain and another one called Adama, who I'd never heard of before, but apparently Adama is the high priest of the Lumerian city of light, which later on was called Talos.
So I guess if we're going with all this, there's got to be a belief that the Lumerians are the UFOs.
Potentially, yes. However, what is believed now is that Lumeria doesn't exist in the physical state of being. It exists in the fifth dimension. So kind of like this other outside dimension inside the mountain.
Convenient.
So they're really beings of light. Yeah.
That really makes it convenient for all science. We just have to well, it's because in the fifth dimension. Of course you can't see the Crystal City.
Right. And the fact that nowadays mostly the Lumerians are channeled instead of seen.
So Lumeria is just a state of mind.
Potentially.
So it exists if we believe it exists.
But I did come across these two different people who had kind of these stories. So in the 1880s, there was a boy named Frederick S. Oliver, and he went into the mountains, into Mount Shasta with his family to kind of do some searching for gold, which was happening during that time period. He said when he was there, he felt something strange, like a strange energy come through him, and he had a chunk of missing time. And he was there alone. Like he went up with his family, but got separated from his family kind of, and then had a chunk of missing time and then was reunited with his family. So he went back home, sat down, and just started channeling some message and wrote a whole book named A Dweller on Two Planets, which discussed the stories of Atlantis and Lemuria. And that's where the stories actually came from.
Oh, wow. So he kind of was the catalyst.
Right. Now, does that mean that Lemuria and Atlantis don't exist? No, because there are other stories that are older than the 1880s that came from different continents. So I do believe there is some stake in Lemuria, but whether Lumerians are inside Mount Shasta, I'm not sure. But then I was able to find another story that in 1904, a man named J.C. Brown, who was this British prospector, went in looking for gold in the caves in Mount Shasta. And he came upon a cave that was just filled with gold shields and very tall mummies. And it was just filled with gold. And
this was in Shasta?
Inside Shasta, inside
mummies.
The cave. Mummies.
What?
So, and I believe I should have looked it up. I didn't go. Once I saw mummies, I was like, oh, okay, cool. I didn't look it up more. I thought I came across something very briefly and just closed it because I got sidetracked. I think they actually did an archaeological dig and found large bones up on Mount Shasta. So, I mean, like of giants.
Oh my God, you can't just drop that on me. Side note.
Sorry.
They might
They might have. But the thing is that we could do a whole episode on giants because I know that they found bones of giants all over the
Let's
whole
put
world.
That on the list. Giants.
Yeah.
I'm writing it down. That's one that kind of ties back to Enoch and okay. So there may have been giant bones on Shasta.
Right.
But there were mummies?
There were mummies and lots of gold found in the mountain.
I'm seeing that they were 10 feet tall.
Oh, okay.
The mummies.
Okay. So this guy just had said giant mummies, but yeah. So to me, I'm like, okay, so they found gold in there, but let's not forget, he found that in 1904. People have been in the area since 5000 BC. We don't know if all of them were natives. There could be people before the natives. They just said that there was proof of civilization back then.
Right. So what did that look
So,
like?
right. They did say in the proof that I found, they were able to find like actual huts that were made back in
Mm,
5000 BC, which I thought was beautiful.
that's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So the fact that they were able to find them intact.
Dang, that's really cool. Do you have any other tidbits on top of that?
I don't. Yeah, that
Okay.
was just kind of all. So that was my research into Lumeria, Saint Germain, the natives. I don't know if I did it justice, but
I'm glad we were splitting that up because that's a lot of activity for one mountain. What the fuck,
uh-huh.
Shasta?
I just think, I was like, oh, what parallel is it on? It's like the 40th parallel. So not the 37th,
Okay.
but but 40th. Um, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. Have you ever been there?
So, for my personal experience, I have not stopped on Shasta. I've driven through when going to like
Mm-hmm.
road trips to Disneyland as a kid, or just like coming from California going to Salem, Oregon. And
Mm-hmm.
so all my experiences were just driving through, and I distinctly will remember my dad complaining. Like every time we'd get
Mm-hmm.
to Shasta, he'd be like, "Oh, here we are. We're going up Shasta. It's going to use all our gas. It's going to be hot. Here we go, guys. Here we go." And like he'd make it a big thing just to let us all know he's suffering as he's driving up Shasta. And so
I
I have
love it.
these memories of him just being like perturbed on the mountain,
Mm-hmm.
or expressing that frustration. So I'm like, was Shasta the catalyst? And it was just like messing with his brain where he was like, oh, not Shasta. It's too paranormal. It's too high of consciousness.
It was trying to make him work through all of his baggage.
He couldn't take it. He
He couldn't
wasn't
handle
ready for Shasta. So that's my memories of Shasta, was once one man annoyed by it. What about yours?
So I have one distinct memory of Shasta. We too were driving through on our way to Disney, and I think this was in the late 80s. This trip that I'm talking about, we typically would go right past the city of Mount Shasta, never stop, but this one time we stopped, and I think it was because I was hungry and I wanted something from, so we stopped at the store. And I remember we had been really hot. Your dad's right. I remember being sweaty hot. And as soon as I got out, I just felt this immense cold and kind of tingling energy all over. And the grocery store that we stopped at had this most amazing totem pole outside of it. It was just
Mm.
this, and there was a plaque that had said something like this was from a tribe. I wish I could remember what tribe it was. I have a picture of it somewhere. But I had to take it with the old cameras because this was the 80s. So when I took a
Polaroid?
picture of it, yeah, no, not Polaroid. The ones with the flash.
Oh, and you like wind it?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to take it in 3 parts to piece it together. So
Oh, wow, that's how big and close you were.
that's how big and close. Yeah.
That's
So
cool. That's commitment.
mhm. I just
Before you have the technology of now of a camera of doing the 3 photos.
right. So I would love to go back because like I said, I do remember getting out and just having this immense feeling of something else. And that's all I get. And I have always wanted to go back, but never had the means or opportunity to do so, really.
Right. And now that we're older and we always want our psychotic camping trip investigations, this is the perfect
Yes,
locale. I'm wondering if we could ever see the Bernie Falls area, because that just sounds really pretty to be by the waterfalls.
that'd be great. And we would have to go in the summertime because that's when the snow is less. I guess I did come across several stories of people going missing on Mount
Uh,
Shasta.
uh-oh.
Um,
This
like
is
in
where I'm going to get scared.
Yeah, missing 411. There
No.
was one story I came about. This guy is an avid hiker. I should have wrote down his name, but I didn't think it was part of the story. So he's an avid hiker, went hiking with 3 of his friends. This was in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. I apologize on my lack of detail because I'm not, like I said, I didn't know if I was going to talk about it. Anyways, he went up. He wasn't really feeling well. I guess he had um, altitude sickness, which was causing him to have diarrhea and throwing up. And he just wanted to get his trip over with. So he kind of left his friends and went off on his own to go hike up the mountain a little bit. I think he just wanted to get away because he was embarrassed about how he was feeling. And so they weren't that far behind him, maybe a half an hour behind him, his friends, and they never found him. He disappeared in an area where there was no snow, no trees, all flat. They didn't find one iota of him. There were no caves, no nothing.
No evidence left behind. No clothes, no backpacks, no shoes.
Nothing.
Wow.
Just completely disappeared. And he was an avid hiker, had hiked many times up Mount Shasta. Just disappeared. There was nowhere for him to go. And that's why they were confused as to what happened to him. Because like I said, there were no trees, no caves. This was an area where, he was hiking up a mountain, but there's nothing there. So where would he have gone? And they just never found him.
Dang. So that is just one more level of the messed upness of Shasta is missing people. I mean, it's bound to happen in the wilderness. Right. But that missing 411 stuff is a whole other rabbit hole of of creepy paranormal disappearances.
Yeah.
Okay, Mount Shasta. I don't know what's going on with you, but I'm intrigued.
Yes.
I'm intrigued.
Me too.
Should we wrap it up for today?
Sure, let's do it.
All right, guys. Well, you can always look forward to new episodes every Wednesday. Those are going to be at cousinscoven.home.blog. We'll also have all of our episodes over on YouTube, Podomatic, Google Play, and anywhere else podcasts can be found. If you guys have any research suggestions or questions, send those to cousinscoven2@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you guys. Please like, share, and subscribe.
And also, don't forget to check out our Patreon. We're doing an extra episode today after this. And may you find happiness in your heart, love for yourself, and join each other. Blessings to all.